So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin DeRosa. I'm the Director of University Advising at Cal Poly Pomona. And this is the session Re-Enrollment Strategies for Continuing Students, a case study for spring 2022. And I am joined by my amazing colleagues and bosses and just this amazing community of women that I work with. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves as well. My wonderful boss, Dr. Santiago-Gonzalez, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. My name is Cecilia Santiago-Gonzalez, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for Student Success at Cal Poly Pomona. Thank you for being here. And so I am going to hand it over to Jessica.
Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Wagoner, and I'm the Senior Associate Vice President of Enrollment Management and Services. And I'll hand it over to Zoe.
Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name is Zoe Lance. I am the Communications Specialist for the Office of Student Success. And last but not least, Dr. Gomez, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, Terri Gomez, Associate Provost for Student Success, Equity and Innovation. Thank you for joining us today. We are here to talk about some of our strategies through the pandemic. The topic is re-enrollment strategies for continuing students, a case study from spring 2022. As you know, there was nothing normal about spring. And for us, as we started to approach our registration period, we monitor on a daily basis, just looking at trends. We saw something we hadn't seen before, and dramatic dips in enrollment. And so we decided to partner very quickly, and we're going to talk about what we saw, what we did, and what we learned basically today. And so before we get started, just to sort of orient us, we just want to start with a couple of questions for you. And if you could just drop your answers in the chat, that would be lovely. How has the pandemic impacted your student enrollment, if it has impacted your student enrollment? And we'll take a second if you could put that in the chat, your responses, we'd appreciate it. Wow.
As we ask you these questions and ask you to put your answers in the chat, I will be monitoring the chat and kind of giving our panelists an idea of what you all are telling us. San Diego State said that they've increased enrollment. That's awesome. But there are some other campuses like CSUN that dropped a great deal. We're definitely seeing it the same thing at Pomona with more online courses of students wanting more of that. Slightly lower enrollments across all demographic groups from another campus. So some down, some up.
Great demand for online. We know that this is going to be a continuing trend. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yep. Okay, and before we get started, one more question, one more prompt for you. What do you think are the main factors impacting your students' ability to enroll? If you could just drop that in the chat, we'd appreciate it. What do you think are the main factors impacting your students' ability to enroll? Well, as you're thinking about that, maybe we'll just move on, but I'll just say we weren't sure. I mean, we knew there were financial constraints for our students, cost and availability of housing, certainly are factors that we saw too. Go ahead, Zoe.
Yes, lots of that work-life balance for sure. Finances, that was a huge, strain during the COVID-19 pandemic. Responsibilities, personal, family, work, all of the above.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we anticipated some of those things might be the issues we were dealing with, but we were sort of surprised at the array of challenges students were having that we hadn't quite anticipated. And so we hope today that this case study will help illuminate some of those. All righty, next slide. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Dr. Gomez says, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. We were aware of all the impact it was having on our students and our families. So we decided to start really taking a look at enrollment early in the process. Usually we went to the registration window, we remind people, but we did things differently. We decided to start looking at enrollment. We created a strategic report, a custom report we created to look at students in their registration window. So, those in the registration window, did they register? Did they not register that? And we started seeing some slight declines from the previous year in the priority. But priority is just a small group of students. It really wasn't something to totally alarm us. It was nice to see in retros when we look back at when we saw the bigger problem that, it was actually showing in the priority. But as we got through October, our general registration, we were saying, it's looking good, our juniors and seniors, but then we saw there's some dramatic decline in enrollment in our sophomores and our freshmen. And so again, we based on that report looking at, okay, it's our window, why didn't these students, enroll? We were seeing that it was a big decline in our fall 21, 20, and 19 cohorts, which all the students started either during or shortly before the pandemic. Next one. So as we looked at the data, and the first thing we did is we had an emergency meeting. Let's look at the data, let's cut up, let's see where the declines are. Is it really what we're seeing? And it was. So we had about 6,128 students that were eligible to enroll. That means they weren't graduating, they weren't on stuff. These are eligible students that were supposed to register during the registration window that were not enrolling. And we started to break down the data. The data was very apparent. We look at fall 21, 19 to 20. These were the majority. We had 73% of that student population, 73, that over 4,000 of them that were from these cohorts. These cohorts were from students who started in the pandemic or shortly after the pandemic. So we saw, wow, this pandemic is actually impacting our students. And we started looking like why this is happening. And that's exactly what we're going to share today. But again, we came together as a campus to kind of team up to figure out how we're going to address this, but it was very clear in the data that we had a problem.
Thank you, Jessica. As we're speaking about, and the focus of this conference is really it's about equity, right? And really trying to understand the experiences of our students, and the data really, could tell us part of the story. And we went really deep into the data to try to understand where could we really implement the differentiated strategy to reach our students and really understand and support them as we felt, or asked students more questions about what support they needed. We really diced the data. We looked at what colleges they were a part of. Not so surprisingly, there were some of our larger colleges, some of our STEM colleges that the students were not enrolling. We looked at the amounts of fees that students owed. Was that a barrier for them to graduate? Did they have a hold because of a financial debt that they were carrying? What kind of fees did they have? Were they book holds? Were they housing, equipment? And where could we really strategize to remove any of those fees? As some of you have mentioned, a lot of demand for online courses or hybrid courses. And so we looked at what type of courses they had enrolled in the fall, since we were still sort of in the preliminary stages of coming back to campus in the fall. And we looked at those data. We really didn't see much difference, but we were hearing anecdotally from students about their interest in waiting to see how the schedule was going to pan out, and what they needed, what kind of classes were going to be offered. We also made some really interesting discoveries, and Zoe will walk us through how we made that. But we also looked if students had classes in their shopping cart, just sitting there, no Amazon reminder to tell you how great that deal was. But really just, that was another data point. This has been a data point that we had never as a campus looked at, and that was really important for us. We really did a targeted approach for students who were at risk of discontinuation because they were going to exceed their stop out. We looked at race and ethnicity. And to not surprise, historically underserved students were the ones that were disproportionately not enrolling in courses. For our campus, we, over 50% of our students are students of color. The majority of our students are Latinx students from that population, and they were disproportionately represented in this group. We also looked at Pell and first generation status. And for first generation, a lot of not first generation students were not enrolling at a disproportionate rates. Interesting enough, for Pell students, we actually found that non-Pell students, so non-low income students, were the ones that were not enrolling in for the following term. And why do you think that may be? Why do you think non-Pell students might be in in a higher category in this bucket? Why do you think so? Any guesses? If not, I can just tell you. So no, not actually transferring out, but they tend to be in the middle, right? They were middle class students who may not have benefited from some of the HERF funding or some of the other available support. And so it was, or their parents or families were mostly impacted by some of the layoffs and some of the things related to their work. And so again, then there were some other strategies that Jessica's team focused on to ensure that there was an opportunity for those students that were impacted to recalculate their financial aid package or do other things. So really analyzing our student data was critical in our strategies, and really ensuring that that we were meeting the unique needs of all these different populations. Next slide. Another thing that was really critical for us is to look at our holds. And for those of you that are part of the CSU, you know that we are looking at administrative barriers and removing administrative barriers to student success. We realized that out of these students, 45% of those students had a type of hold. They could have had multiple holds, but at least they had one of these holds. And so we realized, in the table, we can see the number of holds that there are. So for example, for COVID-19, the vaccine requirement, we had 427, and I'm going to read it for accessibility purposes, just to make sure that that everyone has access to this data. Financial, we had 1,236 holds. Title IX was a big hold, so students not completing their Title IX training, 913. We had registrars holds that were associated with applying for graduation and whatnot, advising holds, so these were students that were in some sort of negative academic standing, and other types of holds. And then we dug deeper into that. But really, although we tried really to remove any of these institutional barriers, 55% of the students had no holds. So really trying to figure out what was really preventing them from registering. We addressed the holds definitely, but really what was really preventing those 55% of students from enrolling. I want to ask, what are some factors that you've looked at in terms of what characteristics of students weren't enrolling at your institution? What kind of data dives have you done? And what have been some significant administrative barriers on your campuses? And how are you addressing those? And I think Zoe has put those in the chat. So we want to hear from you.
Even if you want to unmute yourself and share with us, you can do that as well instead of typing it out.
I know typing takes a lot of it. Oh, yes.
Christina.
Hi, so I would say a few of these resonate as well for our institution at Dominguez Hills. I would say the hugest one that seems to be a barrier prior to COVID and and continuing as a financial hold. And also the movement for the COVID-19 vaccination. So particularly that getting that booster in as well. There was phone banking done, there was outreach done, I know, on part of the university to get that information out, but also not a hold, but students reluctant to return to less offerings of online courses has been a huge barrier, that there is a minimal amount of those courses available. Although we were never, we're not accredited to offer fully online, and we are a front-facing institution, students really find that that lended to flexibility for them to be able to work and to be able to be in class and to get things done, as some of them took on a lot of responsibility for their families.
Absolutely, Christina, you definitely hit that. We, we made an institutional decision, which was not an easy one to convince other people to do. We're like, we lifted all these holds, all these financial holds. We lifted them knowing that that wasn't necessarily going to solve the issue, but it was giving us more time to work with students. So those students who had financial holds, we temporarily lifted and allowed them to register for the following term. Again, it doesn't sort of solve the issue of helping students with their financial situation, just gave us a little bit more time to support them in other ways through, payment plans or, other HERF specific funding that we might have offered. So, yes, thinking about just ways in which we can continue to support our students, given the changes that they're expecting us to have, but that sometimes we're limited in doing what we can within our policies and structures.
Yes, in the chat, Chris echoes the financial barriers and how phone banking has also been a way to try and get in touch with students. Chrissy from Channel Islands, the sense of belonging and students not having that, which is a big problem.
Yes, absolutely.
If I can, Dr. Santiago-Gonzalez, I wanted to, follow up on that point about, virtual learning, because since then, I mean, it's shown us so much about what we can do in times of crisis. But since then, we've had other issues that have come up, right? So we've had students ask, with the monkeypox outbreak, will there be a move towards virtual learning? If with gas prices so high, I'm commuting from so far away, are there opportunities for that? So I think there, we'll continue to see these kind of questions, even, I don't want to say we're post-pandemic, but, as we transition into other phases in time, there will be these consistent barriers for students. It's not so much just COVID, it is these other things that cause students to want these virtual learning modes.
And I like to add to that. I think what it's not only just what they expect, they actually expect things to change now. They've changed. They do want some variety, and they also, they want services online. I noticed a foot traffic, even though we had most of our classes online, our foot traffic was low. I was like the second week of school, I'm like, where are the students? I think they kind of know how to navigate through in person as well as virtual. So things have changed. I think their expectations have changed since the pandemic. It's very interesting. They want flexibility in everything they do, from classes to support.
Jessica, if I may add, and this is actually Terri and I just had a conversation this morning also about how do we help if we are going to continue to offer more virtual experiences or online or hybrid classes. How do we support students? We've been getting a lot of feedback from faculty about, students are sending me Google Doc links instead of they don't know how to upload a document to Canvas, or, the time management piece or the engagement piece. We have a colleague who brought chips to her class because she wanted them to be engaged, and she got dinged on it for in a midterm evaluation, said, don't bribe us with chips to participate. But that was, faculty are trying to engage students. So I think we have the enrollment piece, I think, is a manifestation of what's happening and the types of support structures that we need to to develop to support our students in this new reality of, hybrid online course and everything that's affecting our students. Next slide. So I think you're next.
Yes.
Oh, Terri, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to add, we sometimes hear folks talk about post-pandemic. There's nothing post about what our students are experiencing. And I think universities need to take more responsibility for that and understand that this is long-term impact. And so we have to continue to have strategies in place to deal with it.
Awesome. So we knew who these students were, and so we needed to start communicating with them about taking action. So there was a couple of ways that we did this. The first is we used our campus email to send targeted email messages to these students, encouraging them to register. If they weren't able to register for the semester, we gave them information about what that meant for their status. So students on our campus can take one term off at a time without losing admission and doing any paperwork. So the stop out process, if they stop out and don't enroll the following semester, they are discontinued. So we knew who the students were that may be in that status and gave them specific information about what would happen if they didn't enroll. We also have an artificial intelligence text messaging robot on our campus. It's called Billy Chat. Students can use Billy Chat to ask questions about Cal Poly Pomona 24/7. They are all automatically opted into it, all of our undergraduate students. And we also use Billy to send them messages and campaigns about things that they need to take care of, FYIs, upcoming deadlines, that kind of thing. So we really leaned on Billy to help with both nudging students about taking action. And then I'll also talk about in a second how we got feedback from the students. So the first one we did was we looked at that group of students who had classes in their shopping carts with no holds. They just needed to press enroll. We had that report of students and sent them a message telling them, Billy, your spring 22 courses might be in your Bronco Direct shopping cart. You need to click on finish enrolling to fully enroll. If you need help, watch our how to enroll video, and we gave them a link to a video we have, or join our virtual Zoom queue for help. So we sent them that nudge. We saw a few students after getting that nudge go through the whole process and hit enroll. So we got some of them out that way. We also sent Billy Chat nudges to students with those holds that we talked about earlier in the presentation, with clear steps on how to address them, and also measured how many students took care of those holds after getting the text. We also use surveys within Billy Chat to get some of that kind of feedback from students about where they're at in the process. So I sent this one back in November of 2021. Hi, I noticed recently that you aren't enrolled in spring 22 classes. General registration is still happening until December 1st. So you still have time to register. Is there anything I can help with? Then I gave them a list, kind of a multiple choice sort of situation of what they could tell us about what was going on. So that they were good, they just needed to hit that final enroll button and register ASAP, that they didn't want to or couldn't be enrolled in spring 2022, that they didn't know what to take, the classes that they needed were waitlisted or aren't offered that semester, that they thought that they were enrolled, that they had just enrolled in case they were still on our list before I sent this text, and then something else. So I'll talk about in the next slide after getting through this about what the response rate was on that. But we sent them this text to get a better idea of where they were at in a mass way. We also ended up extending their registration. So we sent them a nudge to tell them, hey, your enrollment period has been extended. Please register ASAP. And then we also embarked on a cross-divisional collaboration with our student affairs partners to identify and address barriers through a call campaign. So the staff got a list of the students, sent them or called them to encourage them to enroll and get in a better idea of where they were at. So go to the next slide and then I'll ask some questions. So this is the response rate on that survey that I mentioned of asking students what's going on, like how can we help you? The biggest group, which was incredible to us was how many students didn't know what to take, that they had a hard time getting in touch with an advisor, figuring out how to use their academic planning tools, which makes sense because these students did a completely virtual orientation. They've been, at home doing classes, so they're not they weren't really in tune with what tools that they had at their disposal. So 588 of 1559 said, I don't know what to take. A big group, about 375, said, I'm good, I'll register ASAP. So awesome, it got them to remind them what to do. 198 said, I don't want to or can't be enrolled in spring 2022. 142 said something else. 111 said that they thought they were enrolled. 91 said the classes I needed are waitlisted or aren't offered. And 54 of them said, I just enrolled. Depending on what they responded, so once they picked one of these, Billy gave them an automatic answer of giving them, kind of their next steps or actions to take. So if they didn't know what to take, encouraging them to meet with an advisor, use their academic planning tools. If they didn't want to or couldn't be enrolled in spring 22, telling them generally about the stop out and discontinuation process. Something else. So if they said something else, Billy asked them, can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on? My humans may be able to help you. I put a sample of some of the something else responses here on this slide, because it really varied as to why students said that they couldn't enroll. So again, going back to that financial part, that they were unable to pay their outstanding fees, wanting to change majors, studying abroad. They were unsure about their graduation status, that they thought they may be graduating. Again, going back to some of what we've been talking about in the chat. We saw a lot of students who had to start working full-time to support their families. Again, the online classes, so reinforcing some of that data from before, that they wanted online options. The vaccine requirement, I know somebody mentioned that about needing that in order to remove the hold. And I just had a baby and I'm trying to find the money to pay for classes. So some of these personal experiences or things that are happening in their personal lives that affect their enrollment. So this was really interesting to us to have that student feedback, especially for the I don't know what to take. We took that list of 588 students, gave them to our Bronco Advising Center team, who are generalists. And these advisors reached out to them. They helped them fill out their planner, our degree planning tool, to help them figure out what to take, and help them, get in touch with another advisor and use their academic planning tool. So we use this data and act on it, so that way we can get students the help that they need. So I'm going to put a couple of questions in the chat around student communication. So what are some of the barriers to student communication, and how are your campuses addressing them, if there was anything specific, during the pandemic? And also, have you found any, specific, unique ways to communicate with your students, kind of get a temperature check, is what I like to call it, on how they're doing? And how do we get to better understanding of why students are acting the way that they are?
Zoe, while folks are responding to that, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your strategies for when you decide to send text messages versus emails, and how that has changed over time.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So we generally send emails first because that's our official way of communicating with students. So they have that information in their campus email inbox. And then we follow up with these texts in the following days after getting those messages. So that way they may have seen it in their inbox and get this message to prompt them to go look at that, or they maybe didn't see it, and this helps them respond faster. So we always do email first and then kind of nudge with these text messages, so that way they have it in both places. And we get really great feedback, obviously, from Billy Chat, because it's easy for students to just text back how they're doing rather than replying to an email or doing a lot of in-depth research. So yes, Monica, I would agree. Our Cal Poly Pomona students like CSUN students say that they're overwhelmed by the number of emails they receive. There's a lot to sift through, a lot to sort through. We were doing a lot of different surveys at that time across campus. And it's hard to keep track of, which survey did I respond to or not, and overlapping questions. So yes, I echo what happened at CSUN.
Zoe, if I can add to that, I think one of the unique things and things that I'm most proud of using Billy Chat or chatbot is that students, I think, realize that there are humans behind it, but also that we take action. And so when students said, I don't know what to take, we told them, you told Billy that you didn't know what to take, so we're following up with you. And so it just doesn't go into a vacuum. It goes really, signals that we care. And I think that's the most important thing that as an institution we can do at this point, given the multitude of things that are happening in our students' lives, even in our own lives, right? Showing that we care about them, that they're not just a number. I mean, we're large institutions, but Billy has really allowed us to create that voice and that thread of care throughout this experience, and to say that we also respect their decisions to take a stop out, that it's okay to take a stop out. Obviously, we have GI 2025 goals, we have retention goals, and we want our students to graduate in a timely manner, but really saying, we want you to make the best informed decision that works for you. And I think respecting them as adults and really guiding them through that process, I think, is a really important piece of this communication strategy.
Yes, and for all of the something else responses, I responded directly to those students to try to connect them with resources across campus or help, answer those questions. So closing that feedback loop so students felt like they were being heard. Awesome. I think we're ready to go to the next slide.
Great. So I think this is me. So in addition to, the communication outreach, we did do a couple of strategic interventions to support students in this time. And I think this was mentioned before, but one of the things that we did was a special registration window after our general registration appointment closed. So we waited until early December when general registration closed for all students. And then we did some targeted outreach to that group that Zoe was referring to, saying, we see that you haven't enrolled at all. We've opened a window just for you. And so it was very targeted to those students, and we gave them, that information plus some of these other resources that I'm going to talk about. One thing that we did was offer some night and weekend registration support via Zoom. So we, typically our advisors on our campus work an 8 to 5 day, recognizing and, just wanting to try everything that we could and recognizing that students were working. And for all of the reasons that we talked about before, it was important to kind of be flexible and to meet students where they were at. We wanted to offer these additional times. So our office coordinated the event, and then we had invited advisors from the advising centers to join us, and it was all via Zoom. And then we were just available for students to hop in. And then as they did, we kind of used the Zoom breakout rooms to split students into their colleges. And then we just moved, as a student came in and told us what college they were in, we would move them to that advisor or to one of our generalists. And then they were able to get the support that they needed. I will be transparent. These events weren't super, like, given the number of students that we've been talking about, thousands and thousands of students, I would say in any event we had 25 to 50 students attend. However, those students had extremely complex problems to navigate. And so we were able to really sit down and go through them. I know Dr. Santiago-Gonzalez had, some pretty significant, I don't know if you want to, share a little bit about your stories of the two students in particular that you worked with, but they needed to sit down with somebody and they needed to do it at these flexible times. So while the impact wasn't huge, it was huge for those students and therefore, made it really important. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Yeah, absolutely. There were, I sat with my team as well to help students and resolve these situations. And, we had students who had just lost, a brother during the pandemic and was experiencing, severe mental health issues. And at that time, actually, we invited our well-being partners in student affairs because there was, as you noted, there were some students who had vaccine-related holds. And it just happened that that our AVP of well-being at that time was on the Zoom call. And, the student was experiencing a crisis right there and then. And I invited her to come and join us our session and work with the student right there and sort of clear, develop some strategies or a plan to help her come forward or address, whatever grief she was experiencing. And so that, and, food insecurity, health concerns. So they were very complex and very touching and very humbling to see what they were going through. And so, those were just two examples. And like I say, if we were able to help just those 2 students or those 35 students, that made us Saturdays in pajamas totally worth it.
And I just want to jump in on Renee's comment. Absolutely, right? GI 2025 is obviously a system imperative. We know we need to close equity gaps. But when it comes down to students being in crisis, the support we need to offer them may be to take a leave of absence, to do a stop out. We need to take care of our students first. That's our obligation. It's our institutional responsibility. So it's been complicated for all of us on the front lines of that, to have these goals and knowing that students are suffering, and sometimes just supporting the students has to be the priority.
Absolutely, Terri. I always think, I'm like, what's gonna help me fall asleep at night? Like, what decisions, right? Like, yes, we gotta keep moving forward and doing whatever we can to not be a barrier for our students, but ultimately it's caring for that student and ensuring that they have the tools and support they need.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, so obviously this made, a huge impact or a huge difference for the students that did come to these sessions. We also tried some in-person registration events, and we did the whole thing too. We threw food at it. We offered our poly trolley, which is our on-campus food truck. This one was not as well taken advantage of. I think it gets back to, students really taking or, enjoying the virtual learning and having that flexibility. We certainly saw that students were more likely to come to our virtual events than our in-person events. And that's okay. We wanted to try it out and see if as students were taking more in-person classes, and we were already here because our staff were back, at least in a hybrid model, we wanted to have that in-person opportunity. So we didn't see a ton of folks out there. We tabled outside. We put us right next to the poly trolley. We had our financial aid folks there. We had our health and well-being team, to discuss those holds. We had our registrar's office. We were all there ready to go, and we just didn't get the buy-in to this. Now, this was spring 2022. So if we tried, something this time around, this December, things might be a little bit different because we certainly have a much higher volume of students on campus now. But at the time, we just, we saw that it wasn't that well taken advantage of. And then lastly, we really partner closely with student affairs at our institution. Academic advising is situated in academic affairs. And so we recognize the value in partnering with our colleagues in our cultural centers, in our male success initiative, in our maximizing engineering potential, all of these programs that students work with very, very closely. We wanted to leverage those relationships and those connections that they have with students, to do outreach as well. So we worked very closely with them, invited them into conversations, asked them to help us to communicate with their student population, since students, they don't necessarily know me, but they will know their cultural center coordinator. And if they outreach to them, they're far more likely to pay attention to that email message or that, that nudge from a familiar face. So, so yeah, all of these things were interventions that we tried to do. So reflecting on these, our next question for the group is, how have you shifted the ways that you've made yourselves accessible to students during the pandemic? And what has worked and what hasn't? So like I said, I'm very transparent that our in-person event didn't work, but we've been very closely over time monitoring, just in general, our advising numbers, and then how students are taking advantage of advising. We have seen that students are first, that students haven't decreased their use of advising. We've actually seen an increase in, students meeting with their advisors over the pandemic. But largely students have taken advantage of those virtual opportunities. So that has allowed us to make decisions about, how we will offer services moving forward. Do we want our advisors to continue to offer Zoom-based sessions if that is how students are taking advantage of it? So it's very much informing our daily practice moving forward.
Yes, Chris echoes that, Erin, of, getting to where students are at, meeting them where they're at, and having the formats available so that they can choose, whether that's a phone call, a Zoom call, in person. There has been a little bit of confusion, though, of students thinking, oh, I thought this was online, but apparently it's in person, and trying to work through some of that issue. For sure.
Yeah, and I will say, and I know this isn't the case for all campuses, but we use EAB's Navigate as our platform for offering advising and scheduling advising. And so that does allow us to define or distinguish between virtual and in-person meetings, and that has helped tremendously to just be able to identify that. But yeah, occasionally we will have the student come in and say, I'm here for my meeting, and then we can just set them up with a computer and they can meet with somebody online.
I wanted to add that even happens to staff sometimes.
Yeah.
I thought this was online.
For sure. Absolutely. We're running from building to building now. So we're used to those Zoom meetings. Berlinda mentioned occasionally offering the advising past 5 p.m. Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think I don't know, Zoe, this was not part of our slide deck, but we are, because of all of these things that we've learned in terms of just making ourselves accessible and being more timely, we are trying something new with our chatbot and reminding students sooner when they miss their enrollment window. And so we're really excited to try those things and trying to be more timely in the way that we reach out to them, so that they can make that appointment with an advisor if they don't know what to take. And so we're excited, and maybe it'll be another session, but I don't know, so if you wanted to add more to that.
Yeah, no, we live up to our campus motto of learning by doing. And a lot of the student response to our text messages, to our emails, to our advising sessions, I'm trying to make our student communication process more iterative and improve every time. So as a result of this, we've decided for this spring 2023 registration cycle that we're embarking on next week, to not wait until everybody's windows have opened, but do a more proactive approach in the days after, students' appointment enrolls or appointment window opens, asking them like, hey, we noticed you haven't registered. Can we help at all? Are you planning to register? So trying to be more proactive. And so that way we don't get to the end of the cycle and worry about students. So hopefully that might be another session or another presentation sometime, but I'm happy to talk more about that if anybody wants to at a later time.
Thank you all. And I will, just to respond to Chris's message about driving all the way to campus just for one meeting. Absolutely. And we've actually seen our students start to multitask. Like, we've had advisors meeting with students while the student is in line to pick up like their Chipotle or, they're placing their order at McDonald's, and we say, why don't we pull over? We'll wait till you pull over and then we'll do this safely. But yes, we are in a multitasking world now. Great. Okay. And then, the next piece of this process is really just determining how we can track our interventions and our progress. And we did that in a couple of ways. So the first way was, like I mentioned, we use EAB Navigate, and it has a feature where you can send out a campaign to students. So it's an email to students with an embedded link in it. And that link will connect students to, in our case, we directed it to our registration system. And then over time, because that is a defined group of students, we could kind of track, okay, if we send it on this day, if we check in 2 days later, how many of those students in that defined group have registered since then? So not only how many students clicked on that link, but then how many have actually registered for the next term, and how many units have they registered for? So that was one of our strategies that we use in combination with the reports that Jessica was referring to at the beginning. We used common services for all of our notes. So we again, we use EAB Navigate as our common advising, scheduling, and note-taking feature. So as we were documenting on these appointments, we use the same service across the board, and it's not one that we normally use. You know, it's not general advising, or it's not registration. I think we use something like re-enrollment support, and that allowed us to pull all of that data for students, and again, mine it for some of the same things that Zoe was referring to before. You know, we could look for kind of that anecdotal, you know, what is going on with these students and how can we support them? And then we continued to monitor those daily enrollment trends that Jessica had mentioned before. Great. So I think Dr. Gomez, you were going to talk us through the next slides.
Yes, so assessing our outcomes is really important. We re-enrolled over 600 students during that special registration window. It was challenging, but it was so important to do that. And in total, 3,260 students registered as a result of all of our efforts. You know, we know that we're going to continue to need to do this work, as our team has talked about. These students who entered the university during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, do not feel particularly connected to the campus. And so we have to be really innovative with our strategies to engage them, to orient them to campus, to continue to reorient them to campus. And we can't just say, gosh, it's really too bad that students you know, feel disconnected in their classrooms. We have to do something as an institution to think through how we can better engage students. And that's really our charge. Just to pose a question for you, what other factors or items might you or we consider in the future? And if you could just add that to the chat or unmute yourself, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, anything different that you would have done, or things that you think we could have done differently or considered? Maybe we're getting free brain power from you.
I will mention, as you're thinking about that, that some of those students who had the financial holds, they did end up having debt discharged if they met certain criteria. We couldn't announce that at that point because it was still under review, but we ended up discharging significant debt for a number of those students. So they, you know, it was a temporarily we temporarily lifted the hold, and then in the next couple of months they received notification that their debt had in fact been relieved, and that was transformational.
I think there's a question about whether we used EAB's texting feature. We did not, for many reasons. I think partly because we really want to leverage our AI bot. I mean, students can get text messages about reminders for appointments, but in terms of outreaching, we don't have that capability, because we definitely want to have a coordinated approach. And I think once we open the text messaging feature, we might lose some of that and overwhelm students. And we definitely don't want text messaging to be the next email, but it's not off the table. I think we can continue exploring that. And it just happens that we have a pretty robust AI feature on our campus, and it works for us. But that was a consideration for sure.
And I'll add that when we brought our bot, Billy, on board, we fought tooth and nail to make sure it wasn't an opt-in. We wanted to ensure it was opt-out so that we could reach more students. That was not easy, and it was a hard-won battle, but most of our students are engaged with the bot, and it's their first line of communication with us.
Yeah. Terri, if I may, related to the bot, and I think as we are thinking about really understanding who our students are and really tailoring our approaches to their needs, we've seen, no gaps in the number of, URM students who are using the bot. Actually, they're using it sometimes at higher rates. First gen students are using it at higher rates. Transfer students are using it as at the same rate as freshmen. And so really trying to ensure that we also look at our utilization of the bot to ensure that we're not widening the gap, or that we're not being culturally responsive. That is a big commitment that we have from our team to ensure that we are doing the best that we can to reach out our students.
And I will note San Diego State, great partner in this kind of work, really forward thinking, right? They've moved to a pay tuition after registration model. I know there would be a lot of resistance for that model, but we need examples of folks in the system who are doing it so that we can convince our folks that this is the way to go. So Chris, we'd like to hear more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I know that Jessica is working on, is leading the charge to increase our hold threshold. So our current threshold is $200. If students have anything above $200, students get a hold. And sometimes there's less than that, but we won't get into that. But that's a big challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's also a change too that we've made in the pandemic. Is it really worth holding a student to register for $10? Sometimes these students get holds where they, we like our bookstore holds, we're like it's even less than that, and we're holding them up. So we're also here to learn from other campuses as well, because that's something we want to do. We want to lessen those barriers, and so we're focusing our work and hopefully getting that up a little bit, like Cecilia said.
Next slide. So going forward, again, we're very clear that this wasn't just like, well, that was a nice little effort and let's go back to business as usual. There is no going back to business as usual. One of the things we had done was to extend stop outs and leave of absence. We're going to continue to use that as we need to support our students. Clearly, weekend and evening support matters. It makes a difference. We can figure out how to do that with our staff, so that gives them some flexibility as well. So we will continue doing that. We use National Student Clearinghouse data. We're currently doing a re-enrollment campaign, and we use the data to see if our students who have been discontinued are at another institution. Those who are not and in good standing, we are going after them, but we also have to find some ways to support their re-entry into the university. So those things, we're going to continue to use that it's going to be an ongoing strategy. Very important, we got to leverage those digital planners. That's easier to require with new students, students who are about to exit, who are juniors and seniors. It's a little bit more challenging, but we're trying food. We're going to try everything we can to get them to complete their digital planner, but we have the tool. Now we got to get students fully on board. And then finally, we have a really robust summer program where we offer completion grants to seniors who are graduating. And we do all sorts of stuff for everybody else to complete, mostly GEs. First, we started with A2, B4 to make sure we finish in that first year. And now we're the golden 4 +2. And, I'm sure we're going to continue to add to that. That's a combination of chancellor office support, some of our campus foundation funding, and incredible impact. So those will be strategies we continue to deploy. Next slide.
Great. So I think our last activity was kind of, to do breakout sessions and give you all an opportunity to share and reflect more, and then, maybe bring back your feedback. But before we do that, we wanted to open it up to other questions, and I can stop sharing for a second before we do that to see if there are other questions, or just kind of invite any general discussion. Is this consistent with your experiences? Definitely not, because some folks had big increases in enrollment, but yeah, where does this differ from your institution? Okay, well, if no feedback here, then I'm going to ask our wonderful producer, Cindy.
I
Go
think
ahead, Chris.
Hello, hello. First, I just want to congratulate you all on that wonderful work. That really takes a large effort on a campus to pull that off. When you start talking about phone banking and responding to all the concerns that come through from surveys. So it really takes a lot of collaboration. So congratulations on that work. No, my only comment is that, as I say, it takes a lot of work. This is something we're going to have to continue to do, regardless of whether we're in a pandemic or not. It's really about like caring about the students who get enrolled and that they finish. And I think for so long, many campuses, because the enrollment just keeps coming in, they weren't as worried about students who didn't come back and caring about why that happened. And I think I love these efforts around really doing individualized work to support students to make sure that they return to the university and seeing what those barriers are that are preventing them from doing that. I'm at San Diego State. I'm the director of our CARES team. I've been at the university over 20 years, but our CARES team was just established less than 2 years ago. So it's a new role for me on the campus, but I'm involved in a lot of those efforts as well. So thanks for sharing and presenting today.
Thank you, Chris. And I can't stress enough the importance, we have such a lifeline, direct line to our CARES team as well, and ensuring that students, basic needs, well-being needs, mental health concerns are addressed. If we don't offer that, we're going to get back to where we were. And again, this is definitely, there's an accountability piece that we have to the chancellor's office. But we're accountable to our students. That's the main goal. We want to make sure that we address those needs holistically. I know Sabrina had a question about students returning following academic probation and disqualification. And that's been a point of conversation for us. And I know Berlinda's here as one of our retention and graduation specialists. And we've been having lots of discussions, as many of you had ABC no credit or credit no credit policy that masked which was great, right? But it masked a lot of the difficulties and that our students were going through, academically. And so we're at this point now where we're trying to find ways in which we can support students who got into academic probation or disqualification during the pandemic, or have been before the pandemic, have been on academic probation 1 term versus 3 terms. And because those are different approaches that we have to take. I think it gets harder when we're trying to reach out to students who have been disqualified and really don't meet even the readmissions criteria. So we're working with Jessica and her team to ensure that students have a pathway. Actually, our process has been in place for a very long time, even before this re-enrollment, where we have a dedicated advisor in my office and that works with admissions to help develop a plan for students to get readmitted to the university. The unfortunate piece of this is that students have to get back into a good standing by taking open university courses or extended university, because if we readmit them under the admissible requirements, the 2.0, below a 2.0, they're gonna fall back into academic disqualification, and that's just not the right thing to do. And so we have to develop a plan. When they get disqualified, they get that notice to make an appointment in our office. It's Jay, to make an appointment with Jay or their retention and graduation specialist. It's really a team that works with these students so that if they've been academically disqualified, they have a path to come forward, or they know what steps they need to take next. So we have not seen the full effects. I think we're just starting to see the numbers of students who were academically disqualified be pre-pandemic levels, because again, the no credit grading system masks a lot of that.
And I wanted to add to that is that we're also seeing their financial aid, because they need academic, their progress towards degree has been delayed with, again, we were there to help. These were necessary steps we took in order to help our students through a crisis. But now we are seeing the impact, and I know financial aid, we're seeing a lot more students that aren't making progress because of that. So it is all hands on deck to figure out how we can continue to help these students be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think part of it is there's been a lot of other things that we need to work on in improving student self-efficacy after being on academic probation and all these things. And the retention and graduation specialists on our college campus, they do a great job at, assessing what are the factors, the underlying factors that are really impacting a student's academic standing. And I don't know if Berlinda wants to talk, but she is again one of our retention and graduation specialists here that works with students.
Yeah, I can definitely add that when we look at the surveys of what they filled out as indicators that were preventing their progress, majority of them, a majority of the reasons were non-academic. So when we reach out to them, one of the clarifying things that I try and explain is, I'm not here to judge them. I'm not here to question whether they belong or where they should be at the university, but really letting them know what I am there for is to help understand what were the challenges, understand what they need, and how we can support them.
Thank you, Berlinda. Very important.
Mhm. Any other thoughts or questions before we move into our breakout rooms? Okay.
What's our time that
So-
we're in a room?
Just 10 minutes. So we thought we could give you 10 minutes to just talk. We have several questions. Zoe, if you can help me put them in the chat. Sorry about that. So yeah, we have 5 questions over 10 minutes. So we'll break you up into groups of 3 or 4 and would just, love for you to kind of share with each other what has worked or hasn't worked. And then come back, and if everybody can share out something, that would be great. 15 minutes. Their last 15 minutes, we just wanted to invite any reflections from the groups, amazing ideas that you had that you want to share with us, reflections on your own institutions. What are our glaring omissions? Help us get better. Help your colleagues get better. Anybody want to share? Maybe somebody from each group?
I'll go first.
Awesome. Thanks, Pamela.
So we talked a lot about just the different barriers. I know we had already touched upon it, throughout everything, but just, financial barriers, the multiple emails and trainings, the registration holds for fees, whether it's a really large fee, let's say for housing, or I believe like what Jessica said, a $10 fee, like, come on, like really, but, I know for us on our campus at Fullerton, one of the main things is that since the pandemic and we all came back last fall of 21, there's a lot of students who prefer to have online classes or hybrid classes because it's easier for them. They don't live in Orange County. They don't live close by. They're commuting from all different places, Riverside, Victorville, Hemet, Hesperia, all different places from LA, and even driving to campus 2-3 days a week. And especially now with the cost of gas, it's just becoming more and more challenging. Students who are single parents, same thing, and then working. And so how, we're just trying to figure out how we can support. I think right now the issue is, I think faculty and professional staff are on board to say, hey, let's have a mix of everything and then let the student decide what works best for them. But when you have the main administrator, leader of the campus saying brick and mortar, it has to be brick and mortar, that's tough, because if that's the final say, then how do you work around those parameters so that you can, you have to think it's about the student. It can't be about what the administration thinks the student needs. If the students are saying this is what we want, then why are we not giving it to them? And that's what we're experiencing on our campus, sadly. So we try to do whatever we can to just support them, both the faculty and the professional staff working with them.
Pamela, I think what you said is that we have to change, right? And it's going to take the whole system to change, because I also recognize that we are bound by our accreditation. We're bound, to how many courses we offer. So it's that we have to be comfortable with change and leading change and being part of the change. Great. Are we at time, Erin?
I think there might be a little bit more time. I thought it was 2:15, but it might be 2:30, but either way, like we don't need to to keep folks, or I know it's a long day and you might want to get a drink or just stretch before your next session. So we can wrap up there, and maybe we can hang back for a few minutes if you had any individual questions. But we just want to thank you all for engaging with us today. I think we all learned a lot from you, and I hope you learned a little bit from us. And yeah, we just really appreciate you and hope you have a great day. Thanks all.